and Development Authority, NYSERDA. Thanks for joining the call today. Briefly, it's NYSERDA's intent that local elected officials and staff have the information, tools, and resources that you need to make LED streetlight projects as turnkey and beneficial to communities as possible. And today's call features an amazing group. I mean, it really can't be overstated. They're the state's, even the world's top experts on LED streetlights, and really a whole range of clean energy projects and policies that you might consider. And they can help you make these projects a reality. Because when you switch out your streetlights, you're not only helping to address our most serious energy challenges by saving a tremendous amount of energy, you're also saving taxpayer dollars and keeping your infrastructure in a state of good repair. But it can also help you win grant funding and recognition through NYSERDA's Clean Energy Communities Initiative. So real quickly, NYSERDA has identified 10 high-impact actions that local governments can take to save energy, create jobs, and improve the environment. If you complete 4 of the 10 high-impact actions, you'll be named a Clean Energy Community by the state of New York. And if you act quickly, you'll be eligible for grants of between $50,000 and $250,000. A total of 163 communities, 18 communities in each region of the state will receive grants through this program. And LED streetlights is one of the 10 high-impact actions. And to earn credit for the LED streetlight action, you'll need to convert at least half of your Cobra Head-style streetlights to LEDs. And the documentation you need to prepare and submit, it might take you 5 minutes to go onto our website and submit that documentation. But to help you implement these LED streetlight projects and other high-impact actions, we have dedicated and knowledgeable clean energy communities coordinators. Maybe we can flip the slide forward. Who are positioned in every region of the state, available to work with you free of charge. And some of these coordinators are presenters on today's call. And to learn more about the program and to connect with the coordinator for your region, please visit nyserda.ny.gov/CEC. So again, that's NYSERDA, nyserda.ny.gov/CEC, like Clean Energy Communities. And without further ado, I'm going to kick it back to Pat. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brad. All right. Well, I think if you're here today, you already are thinking about LED streetlight conversion for your community, but sometimes we get so caught up in talking about the strictly energy savings that we gloss over some of the other really significant benefits. So just to recap, the research is in. There are energy savings to be expected of up to 65%, and in some parts of the state, even more deeper savings, not more deeper, even deeper savings. Greenhouse gas reductions, of course, are a goal of NYSERDA and those of us who are working with them to reduce greenhouse gas in New York State. So in the Hudson Valley alone, where our project, the Mid-Hudson Streetlight Consortium, is operating, we calculated that it would account for 16,500 metric tons a year when a majority of the communities convert. Improved lighting uniformity is a very big benefit over the standard technology that's available today. It's just safer and better lighting. That leads to enhanced pedestrian and vehicle safety, reduced light pollution as well. And of course, as many of you listening to the call have already demonstrated, you are interested and you care about being an environmental leader. So this, with the deep savings that are possible, is a very important way to demonstrate that leadership. And finally, we won't have time today to delve into it entirely, but LED street lighting also offers a chance to capitalize on smart cities, technologies, or as it's commonly known now, the Internet of Things. There's so many other technologies that can go on that light pole. So that's just some of the other benefits that we want you to know about. Our first group up is the consortium that's operating in the Hudson Valley, and we're calling it Pathways to LED Conversion. We're going to take a deep dive into the Central Hudson, Orange and Rockland, and NYSEG territory conversion opportunities. So what is the Mid-Hudson Streetlight Consortium? we're funded by NYSERDA through Cleaner, Greener Communities through mid-2018. It was a competitive opportunity that we took back in 2015 to apply. We just got started in 2016, and we're happy to be well underway now. Some of our first steps were to survey Mid-Hudson communities about where they're at with the conversion possibilities in their area, and to form a consortium of communities that are interested in conversion. And I'll show you those in a moment. One of our very large deliverables was to produce an assessment, which has been completed now and is in final review. It's called LED Streetlight Conversion in New York, a common sense guide for local governments in the Mid-Hudson region. So you'll be hearing from the authors momentarily. We did put together a steering committee of community leaders, mayors, and supervisors who are advising us on how to proceed. And finally, something we'll be talking about a bit later that's a key deliverable for us is that we are advocating for and assisting with procurement aggregation through 2 different RFPs that are in final stages of development now. One is for turnkey services for LED streetlight conversion, and the other is for community managed conversion, which is probably appropriate for smaller communities. What we do is we provide decision support. There's so many decisions that have to be made for a jurisdiction leader, by a jurisdiction leader. Will you rent or own the streetlights? How are you going to finance this project? What are your technology options while you're investing in the conversion itself? What else can you do? How to design a lighting scheme for your community that will avoid community concerns and complaints. That is a very real issue if you've been watching the press on this. And finally, can you save your community money by jumping into an aggregated purchase with some of your neighboring communities? So we help with all of those decisions, and we've gathered a lot of our documentation at a website called nystreetlights.org, and we hope you'll check that out. This is by no means an exhaustive list of every community that we've worked with, but it gives a good approximation of the fact that we are in 7 counties, and we are open for business also, to a limited extent statewide. We have worked it out with NYSERDA so that we can provide assistance and advice to communities outside the Hudson Valley as well. I'm going to turn it over to Jen Metzger at this point.
Thanks, Pat. I'm going to talk about the 2 main pathways to LED conversion for most municipalities in New York. In the state, most streetlights are owned by the utility. Local governments pay a rental charge for each fixture, plus electricity supply and other volumetric charges. So for these municipalities, there are 2 possible pathways. You can upgrade to the utility's LED options where they're available, or you can purchase your streetlight system from the utility and convert to LEDs of your choosing. And there was state legislation in 2015 that was aimed at making that second option a bit easier for municipalities. So we undertook a very detailed analysis of the cost and energy savings of these 2 alternative pathways in the Central Hudson, NYSEG, and O&R territories. It's part of that assessment that Pat mentioned, and I'm going to just share with you some of those findings. Although National Grid service territory was not part of the scope of our project, the general conclusions are likely to be similar. And later in this webinar, Amanda will look more specifically at the National Grid options. Next slide. So before sharing the findings about the cost and savings, I just want to review some of the basics of what's involved in converting to the utilities' LED options. So right now, virtually all utilities offer LED streetlights as an option. The one exception is NYSEG, but they will have options available or are expected to have LED options available in September. We we have reviewed their proposal, and I'll cover that a bit later in this presentation. So if you want to upgrade to the utilities LEDs, that's something you have to request. The utilities are only going to upgrade to LEDs on their own if a light is completely fails. And it will take many decades at that rate for a full LED conversion to occur. As many of you know, we still have some mercury vapor lights in our communities from the 1950s. So it's really going to have to take a proactive decision by municipalities to upgrade to really make that happen more quickly. Now, if you do choose to upgrade to the utilities LED options, the Public Service Commission has ruled that the town has to pay a one-time upfront cost for the payment for the stranded costs of the lights being replaced. Those stranded costs, that represents the remaining undepreciated value of the lights that you currently have. I know it's hard to believe that those lights, some of those lights have any value left, but they do on the utilities books. And I'll give you an idea of what those costs are in the different utility service territories shortly. You should also know that if you decide to upgrade to utility options, the utility really gets to set the pace of the conversion to LEDs. They're only generally obligated to upgrade 15 to 20% of your lights per year, though they have the discretion to do it more quickly. By contrast, if you own the lights, your contractor could upgrade in a matter of weeks or months, depending on how many lights you have. Next slide. So we're going to start by taking a look at the savings and costs in Central Hudson territory. So if your town wanted to upgrade to Central Hudson's LEDs, what will it have to spend to convert? What kinds of costs and energy savings would the town realize from this upgrade? So the stranded asset charges I mentioned earlier, in the 2015 and 2016, Central Hudson was charging $117 per light. That may be a little different now because of investments that they have made, but that was the upfront costs, recent investments they had made, but that has been the cost per light that municipalities would be on the hook for to convert. Once they do convert, however, the annual rates or fixture charges for most of their LED wattages, those rates are actually lower, a little bit lower than the existing lights that you have. So once the stranded asset costs are paid, you could see on average a bill savings of 30% annually, and that's results from a combination of slightly lower rates plus the energy savings. The overall energy savings ranges from 60 to 73% when you convert to the LEDs. That wide range depends upon whether you proactively choose the most efficient LED wattages or if you leave that to the utility to decide. So we advocate basically being very involved in that decision-making process of which LED light is wattage is installed where in your community. Next slide. So how would these savings compare with the municipal ownership scenario in which you purchase the streetlight system from the utility and upgrade to LEDs of your choosing? We found that you would see as much as an 80% reduction in streetlight bills in Central Hudson territory once you paid off that initial investment. Much of these savings result from the fact that you are no longer paying the utility rent for the fixtures, those annual fixture charges. And of course, some of it is also because you've converted to more efficient LED lights. The payback period on this investment will be about 3 to 4 years, depending on the purchase price for the streetlight system. We calculated the payback based on the average prices from purchase agreements that have recently been negotiated between Central Hudson and municipalities. So the comparative savings from municipal ownership are substantially greater for the longer term. Next slide. So let's now take a look at the costs and savings in O&R territory if you convert to O&R's LED options. So the one-time stranded cost charge per light in O&R territory is $165. The annual rates are all lower for all LED wattages that they're offering than the existing fixtures. So after your stranded costs are paid, you would see an average bill reduction of about a third and energy savings of about 50 to 60%, again, depending on which of their wattage replacements you use. Next slide. So how does this compare with the municipal ownership scenario? We found that if you own the lights, you could see up to a 90% annual bill reduction in O&R territory after you pay off the initial investment. And again, that's because of savings on the relatively high fixture rental charges in O&R territory, as well as the greater energy savings you can realize if you choose your own LEDs. Many of their wattage options are oversized, so you could, if you had control over fixture choice, you could choose more appropriate replacements that would provide an additional 20 to 30% savings in energy use. The payback period on this investment would be 3 to 4 years, depending, again, on the utility streetlight purchase price. Next slide. So as I mentioned, in NYSEG territory, they don't yet have an LED option available, but will in September. We analyzed their proposal, but we do expect the PSC to modify that proposal, so the economics could very well change. And we've submitted comments. Actually, we've submitted the Mid-Hudson Streetlight Consortium has been submitting comments on all of these utility tariffs, and improvements were made in the tariffs that I'm discussing today. But what we found, what their proposal suggests is that, first of all, they would determine the stranded cost for municipalities on a case-by-case basis rather than using an average cost like the other municipalities are doing. Some of their proposed rates are higher than the existing lights, and some of the rates are lower. But overall, under their proposal, a municipality would see an average bill reduction of 10 to 15% once the stranded costs have been paid off, and an average annual energy savings of 66%. Next slide. So under a municipal ownership scenario, a town could realize a 70 to 75% annual bill reduction after the initial investment in the conversion is paid off. Again, a lot of the savings is the result of no longer paying the fixture rentals. The payback period is longer than in other service territories. It's 5 to 7 years because NYSEG structures its street light rates differently than the other utilities. Next slide. So which LED conversion pathway is best for you? Here are some of the main factors that you want to consider. First, of course, how do the annual costs compare under utility ownership and municipal ownership scenarios? As we've just seen, you'll see savings from converting to LEDs in both scenarios over the long term, but you'll see substantially more savings if you purchase the system and upgrade to LEDs on your own. You also want to take a look at the energy savings under the two scenarios. Again, the energy savings you can realize under both scenarios are significant, but for some utilities you can see substantially more energy savings if you can choose the wattages to replace your existing lights. The utilities offer, they tend to offer anywhere from, typically 4 LED replacement wattages. O&R has 7 replacement wattages. But we found that a number of those replacement wattages are actually oversized for the fixtures they're replacing, and you could choose more appropriately sized fixtures and see some better savings. And but it's also important to point out that if you do go the utility route, you can choose which of their wattages to install where. So you do have some control over what utility options are installed within your community and can maximize possible savings. You also want to, consider the lighting, characteristics of the fixtures, the lighting choices. I mentioned wattages. There are other non-economic considerations you might want to consider. For example, do you want advanced controls like dimming? Do you want the capacity to dim your lights and take advantage of other control functionality? The utility options do not have these controls, so if you are interested in that, you really have to go the municipal ownership route. You also might want to consider, like, do you want a warmer light color? Do you want a more neutral light color in your community? And does the utility's choice of fixtures conform to your needs? The speed of conversion I mentioned, you also want to you definitely want to consider. If it takes a long time to convert under the utility scenario, that's your foregoing potential energy savings, so you want to talk with your utility about that. And finally, there's the convenience factor. Under the utility ownership pathway, there is some initial decision-making on your part in working with the utility to convert your lights to their LEDs, but after that conversion is done, all you do is pay the bills, as you do now. Under an ownership scenario, responsibility comes with ownership, responsibility for maintaining the lights. But it's really important to realize that with the advent of LED technology, that the work that's involved, the cost that's involved in ongoing O&M is much lower. These fixtures have a much longer lifespan of 20 to 25 years. They have very low initial failure rates. If there are failures, they tend to happen in the first year, which is covered by warranty anyway. So the O&M costs for street lighting has dropped really dramatically. I mean, so much so that Central Hudson didn't even factor in O&M costs into their rates for their LEDs. Next slide. Very quickly, if you're considering moving forward with municipal ownership, you will need to purchase your streetlight system, and that is a negotiation between the utility and the municipality. As I mentioned earlier, the legislature has amended New York State Public Service Law because municipalities have wanted to move forward with this option. And so the process has been streamlined. Timeframes and requirements are now set out in a PSC-approved tariff rather than just left entirely to the utility's discretion. So that really benefits the municipalities. Next slide. So just the basic steps to purchasing the streetlight system: the town requests a purchase price estimate, and the utility has 90 days to provide one. That after considering that estimate, the town then has to notify the utility within 180 days if it wants to proceed with the process and of negotiation. The third step, the town and the utility will reach agreement on a price that it is and can be negotiated, as well as the contents of the operating agreement. The operating agreement sets out the responsibilities of the town and the utility, for the long term as you take over the streetlight system. And these are boilerplate agreements that the utilities have, but you can seek to modify provisions in the negotiation process. And finally, the last step, the PSC has to approve the sale, and that can take anywhere from 3 to 6 months. Next slide. So it's important to know when you're looking at that price that they give you, every utility has a different methodology for figuring out, what that purchase price is going to be. You have a right to request the data behind the cost estimates, and you should do that so that you can make sure so that you can understand it and negotiate it down if that seems reasonable. It's also very important to carefully review the utility's proposed operating agreement and have your town attorney review it. And you can also consult the Mid-Hudson Streetlight Consortium guidance documents for your utility. That can be very helpful. A number of towns or municipalities have in recent years successfully gone through this purchase process and are in the process of installing LEDs, as you see the examples below. And next slide. And finally, we come to our concluding slide. Basically, I've moved through a lot of information very quickly, but the a much more detailed discussion of this is contained in our Common Sense Guide for local governments in the Mid-Hudson region to LED streetlight conversion. It has been completed. It is in review by NYSERDA, but should be released soon. But it truly provides, really all the information you need to guide you through the process, the benefits of LEDs, your various conversion options, the cost and benefits of each. It describes the utility tariffs and requirements, and it gives incredibly valuable information on procurement and financing options to finance if you do decide to go the municipal ownership route. And we're going to hear from our other co-authors of this report on those topics briefly next. Thanks so much.
George, you are unmuted from my end. I think you have to unmute yourself.
So this is George Woodbury, and what I want to do in the next few minutes is just kind of cover the sort of support that the Mid-Hudson Streetlight Consortium is providing. I'm sure you can gather that Jen is an enormous source of information about all of the tariffs and that sort of thing. And then I've got an enormous amount of experience around the actual practical aspects of doing these projects. And, of course, has got a lot of experience around financing and some of the legal aspects, too. So it's a team that's available to you. We're funded through NYSERDA, and as a result, you can turn to us for help, and there's no cost associated with us assisting you. One of the first things we did was to put together that 100-page document that Jen just talked about, which has an enormous amount of good information in it, and all aspects of the conversion. We're also working now on, as was pointed out by Pat earlier, 2 different procurement strategies for communities. One is a community-managed approach, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes, and a turnkey approach. Again, I will discuss each of those individually. And then we're in the process of working to build an aggregation or a collaborative, trying to bring as many communities together to do a joint procurement under one of the 2 approaches in order to command better pricing and to make it less work for the communities, reduce your staff time. And then these documents are being structured so that other communities can, for a limited period of time, piggyback if they decide to proceed at some later date. But our choice, of course, would be that people join the collaborative early on. It doesn't obligate you to do anything except participate in the whole process of selecting and making decisions. But once that's done, you don't have to sign a contract or do anything, and you can wait. But we'd love to have as many communities signed up as possible. So, and the other thing we're going to assist you with this says model LED procurement RFPs. It's not actually an RFP. What we would do is provide you with advice and assistance about all the different technologies, the pros and cons of each, and the things that you ought to be sure that you include in your specifications for the product that you select as part of your design. Next slide. Thank you. So the 2 approaches that we're looking at is the community managed approach. Now this really has application for communities with very small number of lights. And basically what happens under this is that the community acts as a general contractor in that you're going to figure out how you're going to do the audit of your lights, how you're going to do the design of the system, what materials you want to procure. Once you've completed the design, you're going to secure someone to do the installation services, and then you're going to do all the coordination with the utility. So it's going to involve someone on your staff managing this, and we, of course, will provide a lot of back expertise to assist you through the process, and they're going to be there for the collaborative members to kind of handhold you through the whole thing to make it as easy as possible. The advantage of this approach is it results in the lowest cost. And if you have a community with only a few hundred lights, this is not a big challenge to you. And I think with the guidance that we can provide, you'll find it's not that difficult. In addition to that report that Jen and everybody put together, we also put together a PowerPoint presentation on how to conduct the audit. So we also have guidance for communities on how that should be done and the information you ought to collect. The turnkey approach really is for larger communities. We're talking about, you know, communities that have 600, 700 or more lights, or who simply don't want to commit the staff time and are willing to pay slightly more to have a contractor who's familiar with all aspects of these projects, and they would come in and act as your general contractor, and they would provide you a list of services and costs associated with those services that you could pick and choose from, and then they basically would take you through the process from start to finish. Typically, those turnkey approaches are 10 to 12%, 15% more expensive than the community managed approach. And I've done both, and certainly am prepared to assist communities with advice and assistance around all of this, as is the rest of the team. But MHSC is here to support you and to answer your questions and provide you with unbiased information to make this a success for your community. Next slide. This summarizes the comparison of the two approaches. I don't want to spend time on it because we've already talked about it, but it's provided for your reference later when you look back at the slides. Next slide. So we can assist you with reviewing any paperwork that you get from the utility, including the terms and conditions of the agreements, the purchase price negotiations, so on and so forth. We can assist you with doing the financial analysis to look at the savings based on the current tariffs from each utility. And we plan to help you with the RFP process for the collaborative communities and be there to act sort of as a full-time consultant to you as we go through that process. So we basically would help you issue it. We would help you receive the information. We would help you with developing the evaluation processes for evaluating each of the proposals. We would advise and assist you with identifying whether what they're offering makes sense or whether it's correct, and help you through that whole process. So you won't be alone as you go through this. Next slide. This is, will also help you with the design guidance, which has to do with all the different aspects of selecting LED technology. That includes color temperature, color rendering index, the correct wattages, how you select the right wattage by a street class and based on the kind of pedestrian activities are. We can also provide you with information about all the different technologies that are addressing smart cities, or what it's now referred to as the Internet of Things. We can do the financial analysis, as I mentioned, and as Nina is going to cover, we can also provide you with lots of information about various ways that you can fund these projects. So we're here to help you, and we're a free resource, so we encourage you to participate and take advantage of us.
Great.
Thank you, George.
Thank you, George. I'm Nina Orville, and I'm happy to be joining you this morning as a member of the Mid-Hudson Streetlight Consortium. We've heard from a number of municipalities regarding concerns about the cost and financial implications of acquiring and converting their streetlights, or if they already own their lights, as is true in most of Westchester County, simply converting them to LED. And happily, there are a range of options available for municipalities to finance this important upgrade now that the financial benefits of conversion are really well understood and the reliability of LED technology is accepted. So briefly, the primary financing options available for municipalities are municipal finance in various forms, energy performance contracts. We're going to be hearing from Casey Mastro regarding the financing and the project management and implementation services that New York Power Authority can provide, and municipal leasing. It's important to note that the cost to acquire your existing streetlight system, if it's necessary, can be bundled into any of the financing approaches that I mentioned, or can be funded separately by the municipality. Next slide, Pat. So municipal finance, streetlight acquisition and or conversion can be funded by a municipality through issuance of municipal debt, either bonds or bond anticipation notes. Some of the key characteristics of those approaches include, for bond anticipation notes, they're low cost, short term. Bonds have low interest rate but high transaction costs. One study indicated that the median issuance cost was close to 2%. And they both impact borrowing capacity and debt rating. Municipalities can also choose self-funding methods if they have the capacity to do that, including use of capital funds and or operational funds. Considerations for municipalities thinking about this strategy include that they're likely to result in incremental conversion if a municipality is allocating smaller amounts of funding that are available over time, and therefore a municipality may lose the opportunity for economies of scale of a larger sized conversion project. In that case, the municipality would also lose the opportunity to capture full conversion savings more quickly. And in some cases, municipalities just don't have sufficient budget flexibility to consider this approach. Next slide, Pat. So a couple of quick examples. The city of Kingston is acquiring or has acquired their streetlights and is financing conversion through bonding. And in fact, the PSC just approved Kingston's acquisition of the lights from the utility in March of this year. And Kingston has been very active in conversations with the consortium as a member of the collaborative and is intending to participate in the collaborative procurement. Next slide, Pat. The village of Dobbs Ferry is another example. So the village has converted its streetlights in 2 stages. The first stage was done with the use of bands, and since the payback period of 3 years was shorter than the planned 5-year use of the bond anticipation notes, the village administrator at the time felt like that was a very good choice of financing instrument given the short-term payback period for that project. The village recently completed the conversion using a balance of or a mix of capital funds and additional bond anticipation notes. Next slide, Pat. Another approach that municipalities can consider with regard to implementing conversion of streetlights and financing that conversion is an energy performance contract. In this case, projects are financed through the savings that result from the energy improvement project. And some of the key characteristics include full turnkey service. The project financing is often bundled as part of the project, guaranteed savings, and it's important to note that this approach may not be available for small projects. An example is the city of Yonkers, the first municipality, I think, in New York State to convert all of its streetlights, and this is a project that was managed from Brad Tito of NYSERDA when he was the Director of Sustainability in the city of Yonkers. So they converted 12,000 lights. It was an $8.7 million project cost that has resulted in net savings of about $1 million a year and very significant reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, almost 10% a year. Next slide, Pat. This is just a quote from Thomas Meyer, the Commissioner of Public Works from the city of Yonkers, talking about the benefits of that approach. The final strategy that we're going to talk about in terms of financing the LED streetlight conversion is standalone use of tax-exempt municipal leases. So this is a structure that's often used to finance energy performance contracts, but they can also, these tax-exempt municipal leases can also be employed on their own. Key characteristics include that the lessor provides the lessee with funds to purchase equipment and pay contractors, and the lessor takes a security interest in the equipment. The lessor is repaid through lease payments, which are subject to annual appropriation by the municipalities. Structured correctly, a municipal lease does not impact borrowing capacity or credit rating or need voter or controller approval because it's an annual expenditure rather than debt. Next slide. Other characteristics include very low interest costs and transaction fees. This structure is available for a wide range of transaction sizes. I spoke to somebody in one of the companies that provides a lot of municipal leases for energy-related projects. She talked about providing financing ranging from $25,000 up to $50 million in terms of 2 to 20 years. This is a structure that we recommend municipalities take a look at because it's got a lot of benefits. Next slide, Pat. So just summing up, there are a range of options available for municipalities to finance streetlight conversion. It's important to, of course, match the characteristics of these financing options with the needs of each municipality, and to look at factors including the cost of the financing, the municipal borrowing capacity, the optimal term of the financing, and then looking also at benefits versus costs of performance guarantees. And I think the consensus from the Mid-Hudson Streetlight Consortium is that because the reliability of LED streetlights is so good, the cost of a performance guarantee is likely to be higher and potentially significantly higher than the value of that guarantee. The final note is that the collaborative procurement efforts, such as the one that the Mid-Hudson Streetlight Consortium is putting together, is designed to reduce project costs and therefore to reduce the amount of the amount that has to be financed to complete a conversion, and may expand the range of financing options available to municipalities as well. And that wraps up the conversation regarding financing.
Thank you so much, Nina.
Sure.
Let's go to Central New York now. Amanda, I think you're up.
All right, thanks, Pat. So like Pat mentioned, I'm Amanda Mazzoni from the Central New York Regional Planning and Development Board, also Clean Energy Communities Coordinator in Central New York. So it is through that program that we are able to provide assistance to municipalities in the Central New York region related to LED streetlights. So we've heard a lot from the Mid-Hudson region related to processes with utilities in their region, and there's a lot of overlap in Central New York, but there's also a lot of variations because we also, in addition to NYSEG and RG&E utilities, we have National Grid. So I'd just like to start by touching on some of those differences and then provide some information about the assistance that we can and have provided to communities in Central New York so far. So this table that you see has some repeat information about what the two options are, the municipal purchase option as well as the utility ownership option and what's required for each. I'm not going to talk about the municipal purchase option too much again, since you've heard a lot about that from the three previous speakers, and the process is the same in Central New York. So I just wanted to highlight some differences related to the utility ownership option, some specifics related to National Grid territory. So the first thing to note is that they do still require, like the other utilities, that the municipality pay the stranded costs, or what they call the average net book value of the lights being replaced. That's, again, the one-time fee that the utility requires before they will convert to LED streetlights for the municipality. One of the differences in National Grid territory compared to what Jen was mentioning earlier is that they actually require municipalities to convert at least 100 lights or 15% of their lights, whichever is greater, whereas in some of the Mid-Hudson territory, utility territories, they will only convert a maximum of 15% of their lights. So it is one of the differences, and this also applies, as Jennifer earlier mentioned, to the upcoming NYSEG offering of this utility-owned option. Although they will require, as is currently written, at least 100 lights or 20% of the lights, whichever is greater. So it seems like in Central New York, the utilities, if they're going to be converting streetlights to LEDs, they'd prefer more than less of your lights to be converted, which is a little bit of a difference compared to some of the Mid-Hudson utilities. I also wanted to mention that the utilities, there are some costs, some benefits, some pros and cons to both of these options. Some of them were mentioned earlier. With the municipal purchase options, communities have the option for what color temperature they like, as well as the LED wattages that they like, whereas the utility ownership option, the wattages are set by the utility. And also that's one of the differences between the National Grid territory utility option and NYSEG options is the wattages that are offered. So there is even variation between the utilities as far as what wattages are offered. Again, the NYSEG and RG&E option is still under review by the Public Service Commission, so this could change and it could become similar to the National Grid offerings, but that is still up in the air. We'll see. And then one of the main benefits that was mentioned with the municipal purchase option is the greater opportunity for savings in the long run because of the decrease in maintenance fees. So the municipality would no longer have to pay that monthly facility fee every month on their utility bill, which could save them a lot in the long run. Whereas the utility ownership option, you would still have to pay for that, but you'd be paying a lot less for your energy with the utility-owned option. Next slide, please. So related to assistance that we can provide in Central New York, we provide this assistance through what we call our Central New York Bright Lights program. We've been able to assist municipalities in our region by providing cost-benefit analysis reports for the utility-owned LED option, so far just in the National Grid territory, since it's not yet available in NYSEG or RG&E territories, but we will be providing that assistance once it does become available, expected September 1st. We also do help municipalities weigh both options, so we will be providing cost-benefit analysis reports for the municipal purchase option as well, and have just begun starting to do that with some municipalities. As you may have noticed with the municipal purchase option, it could take a lot longer to get started because of the negotiation timeline with the utilities, and that's the reason why we haven't yet put together many of those cost-benefit analysis reports for the municipal purchase option. But it is assistance we can provide and are starting to provide right now. We also have many template letters and handouts that we can provide to assist throughout the whole process, including discussions with the utility related to the purchase price quote, and pursuing working with contractors or energy service companies or NYPA to look for different financing options and also to look into different funding options. One thing that I wanted to note related to the discussions with the utilities is that it's really important, if you are considering purchasing the street lights, that you involve us from the beginning, because at least in Central New York with National Grid, they will require municipalities to sign a non-disclosure agreement before providing a purchase price quote. So if we are included at the beginning, we are able to see your purchase price quote and help with the negotiation with the utilities. But if we are not included at the beginning, it can become a little more tricky and may be more difficult for us to assist if we can't actually look at your purchase price quote. So definitely reach out to us, and if you're in other regions, it may be similar with other utilities. So make sure you're checking in with your local resources, the people on the call today, for example, if you would like assistance throughout this process, just because that can become a barrier with a non-disclosure agreement. Next slide, please. So this little graphic shows a little bit of information about the assistance we've provided to communities in Central New York so far. This information is all related to a summary of the utility-owned LED streetlight analysis reports that we've provided for communities in the National Grid territory. We've provided reports for 23 municipalities so far. And you'll notice that there's a range in the number of streetlights per municipality. The ranges are at the bottom of each of those little bubbles. The average buyout costs, or the net book value costs for the communities we've worked with so far, is $161. So that could give you a sense of what yours might look like if you haven't already acquired your net book value cost from the utility. But you'll note at the bottom there is a significant range between even just the 23 communities we've worked with so far, from $48 per streetlight to $400 per streetlight, which therefore impacts the average project payback. The last little streetlight bubble there, you'll see the average payback period has ranged from communities that we've worked with from 2.3 to 14.5 years, with an average payback of 7.5 years. So there is a lot of variation between municipalities. So it's a little tough to compare yourself to another municipality without first getting the information from your utility, and that's something that we are definitely happy to assist municipalities in looking into this and providing a similar cost-benefit analysis report. Next slide, please. It's also important to note that besides those communities and the communities listed on this slide, we are, like I have mentioned, assisting other communities in looking into the municipal purchase option. Like I said before, we don't have a lot of numbers for that yet. One reason because it's taken a long time to get to the point of actually receiving a purchase price, but then also the non-disclosure agreement prevents us from sharing that purchase price with you. But so it's definitely something that is a municipality by municipality basis that we can assist with. So far, communities that have converted streetlights to LEDs in Central New York using the utility ownership option are listed on this slide that we've assisted with. These 6 communities have converted a total of 639 Cobra Head streetlights. So, you know, you'll probably notice that that's not very many streetlights for 6 communities. Most communities in Central New York are relatively small in terms of the number of streetlights they have compared to other regions of the state. So, you know, there are smaller numbers here, but definitely can still benefit communities who have very few streetlights and get some savings in terms of the energy costs there. The photo in that previous picture was from the Village of Manoa conversion, just so you have a sense of what it might look like when they're converting. It's a really quick process. It took only a couple of days to convert Manoa's couple hundred streetlights. So just to give you a sense of what the process is like. And one other thing I'd like to mention is, again, the utility ownership option is specific to Cobra Head streetlights. So if you have ornamental streetlights that are not currently LED, it is not currently available, at least in National Grid territory or NYSEG, to use the utility-owned option to convert to LEDs. So if you did have some Cobra Head and some ornamental streetlights, you could convert to LEDs for your Cobra Heads using the utility ownership option, but you would have to purchase your streetlights for the ornamental streetlights to convert to LED. Just one thing I wanted to make sure everyone was aware of. Next slide, please. I just wanted to end by providing a link to our website related to the CNY Bright Lights program for your future reference, and if you want to learn more about the communities we've worked with and what assistance we can provide. And there's my contact information if anybody would like to get in touch with me in the future. And thanks very much for having me. I'm happy to answer questions at the end.
Amanda, that was terrific. Thank you so much. All right. Now we're going to hear from Sarah in Long Island. Sarah, I think you're unmuted.
Yes, hello. My name is Sarah Orrell. I'm with Cameron Engineering, and like Amanda, I am one of the Clean Energy Communities coordinators down here on Long Island. We do have a team of 4 coordinators, all of which can help with your LED conversions. So please feel free to reach out, and I could put you in touch with the proper coordinator. So it's been very interesting listening to about all of the negotiations that are needed when purchasing your streetlights from the utility. Down here on Long Island, all municipalities actually outright own their streetlights. So the conversion stories down here are a little different from what you've heard previously. PSEG charges municipalities a per pole rate each month, which is based on how many poles are within that municipality and the type of fixture that they have, whether it be LED, high pressure sodium, and also the wattage. In order for a lower rate to be issued to municipalities, they must notify PSEG when they upgrade to LED streetlights to ensure that those new rates are put in place. So it was just recently announced that PSEG is doing an audit of all of the streetlights on Long Island and will be issuing refunds of up to 2 years for municipalities that may not have notified PSEG that they switched to LEDs. So that's actually really great news, because down here on Long Island, there have been many conversions. Next slide. So there are three methods that municipalities down here on Long Island tend to follow, either replace as you go, bulk replacement, or multi-jurisdictional RFP. So far, no municipality has entered into an LED contract with NYPA, though that is an option, especially since many jurisdictions down here have about 1,000 LEDs, 1,000 streetlights or more within their municipality. Next slide. So I'm just going to go through some mini case studies of municipalities down here so you could see some of the cost savings and issues that they thought were important to them. So the first municipality is the Village of Roslyn, which has about 2,700 residents, and Roslyn is employing the replace-as-you-go method for LED streetlight conversions. The majority of the village is on the National Register of Historic Places, so the village has opted to replace all Cobra Head-style high-pressure sodium fixtures with decorative LEDs. They're the lantern acorn style, and these fixtures are manufactured by a company down here on Long Island, which is also one of the factors that the village took into consideration, and the difference in price is only about $100 per fixture. So the village thought that it was worth it to do the decorative fixtures. Their monthly per pole costs have been reduced by 64%, and those savings are used to purchase new decorative streetlights to convert to LEDs as needed. So far, they've converted about 53% of their streetlights. Next slide. The town of Hempstead, which has 760,000 residents, has opted for a bulk purchase and install. They, between April 2016 and December 2016, have upgraded 34,552 low-pressure sodium and high-pressure sodium streetlights to LED. They utilized a public works bid to procure the fixtures. However, previously, they had already upgraded 17,500 additional streetlights to LEDs utilizing their town staff. As you can see, the net savings are huge, $43 million over 20 years with the 7-year return on investment. And administration is so impressed with these savings that the town has started to upgrade outdoor lighting in their parking lots, their parks, the marinas, and even indoor lighting fixtures at town facilities. I think the most impressive stat here is that last bullet point, an 80% reduction in repairs and complaints from residents since starting the conversions to LED streetlights, which really goes to show how much of the savings are due towards the lack of need of maintenance. Next slide. The next municipality I'd like to speak about is the city of Long Beach. This is a coastal community on the Atlantic Ocean with 33,000 residents. They have an ongoing contract with the service provider. So this contract provides all lighting needs, and since Superstorm Sandy in 2012, they have upgraded over 1,100 streetlights to LEDs, and embrace this technology as one of the ways to increase the city's resiliency and help mitigate the effects of climate change, which is acutely felt in this municipality. The fixtures are typically replaced one street at a time, so Elm Street in total will be replaced at the same time, typically, and all savings are reverted to the general fund. Next slide. The town of Babylon, with 215,000 residents, recently issued an RFP issued to upgrade all 13,250 low-pressure sodium and high-pressure sodium streetlights located within the town, all work to be completed by December of 2017. The intent is that the villages located within the town's borders will be able to piggyback on the final contract. Upgrades are estimated at close to $3.6 million and annual savings of about $900,000. The town currently spends approximately $1.2 million annually to power their existing fixtures and $200,000 to maintain them. In fact, they have 4 DPW staff members who are dedicated to replacing their current light bulbs when they go out, which are about 30 to 40 a day, and this staff is expected to be reassigned, and their positions will be eventually eliminated through attrition as they retire. And one of the things that the town of Babylon did was set up a pilot area in the hamlet of Copeg for an 18-month period to really test residents' opinions of the streetlights, because you read all these articles about how glary they are and if they affect your sleep patterns, and really most of the feedback they got was asking if the realized savings would be put back into tax savings for the property owners, and there really weren't too many complaints about any quote-unquote harsh glow. Next slide. Just wanted to point out a couple of more stats from communities here on Long Island. The town of Smithtown has changed all of their streetlights. They started back in 2010, and they are saving over $500,000 annually. The Village of Hempstead did their conversions as part of a policing initiative, which just goes to show the brighter light really does help with neighborhood safety, and they're also saving close to $250,000 a year. And the town of Southold, who only had 220 streetlights, converted all of them, and they save over $10,000 a year. So it doesn't matter what size municipality you are, you could definitely realize great savings. Next slide. This final slide has some really important contact information. Lizanne Altman is the account manager for all counties, towns, and cities on Long Island. Lizanne is the one that you should contact if you have done some LED streetlights and you are not yet being charged the lower rate. Maggie Ramos, same thing for all of the villages here on Long Island. And Jeff Lano is our NYPA representative who could help with some NYPA contracts for mass conversions of LED streetlights. I did not put my contact information on this slide. I do not know why I did that, but my email address is soral@cameronengineering.com, and my phone number is 516-224-5237. Please call me with any questions you may have regarding LED conversions down on Long Island. Thank you.
Sarah, thank you so much. That was a great report. And we'll definitely get your contact info into the document that goes out. In fact, it's already in it on another page. All right, Casey Mastro of the New York Power Authority coming to us from an undisclosed location at a conference. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, thank you for going the extra mile to duck out of your conference to do this. We really appreciate it.
Oh, it's not a big deal. I appreciate being asked to be here. So my name is Casey Mastro. As was stated, I'm the Central New York Energy Manager for the New York Power Authority. And I wanted to thank the panelists, not only for mentioning the turnkey solution that I'm going to be offering, but for utilizing a similar message across the state, that it really is inconsequential, the size of the municipality, that savings really can be realized from these projects. Specific savings, allocated to each project is different depending on municipality size and other factors, but I think you're going to hear from all of us a very similar story, that this is an absolute way to increase your operating budgets, increase savings, and in some cases take ownership of a vital asset in your community. So next slide, please.
Do you have it there?
Yes. So I wanted to give a little bit of background on the Power Authority, because we, at least wherever I go in Central New York, we are easily confused with other entities that do similar work in the state. The Power Authority is not a utility. The Power Authority, since the 30s, has been generating power and transmitting power but we are not a traditional utility like NYSEG or National Grid, as well as that we are not a traditional ESCO or an energy services company. And I'll speak to that a little bit in the next couple slides. But what we are is the country's largest public power organization, and we own and operate thousands of miles of transmission lines all across the state. And so since the mid-90s, we have been mandated through state law, which I'll describe in a little bit, to implement energy efficiency projects. Not only is that beneficial to the ratepayers across the state, but it's beneficial to the Power Authority as we own a large portion of the infrastructure, and we want to be able to reduce the stress on that infrastructure as much as possible. We offer low-cost power to private industry as well through a program called Recharge New York, but mostly we work in the public sector. If you please, next slide. So this is the public authority law that NYPA is under. Again, we are a public entity, much like was described before, as the Power Authority essentially is a third-party independent not-for-profit that is working to help municipalities and other demographics across the state realize energy savings. The Power Authority is fuel neutral, so we work on any project that reduces, in this particular case, the municipality's utility bill. And so streetlights, with the CEC program being one of the top 10 high-impact action items, starting in the White Plains area where one of our headquarters is located, we began getting many requests to implement street lighting projects. So the Power Authority can work with any municipality across the state in any region, and I'll provide some contact info for who those specific people are if you're not in the Central New York region where I would be representing you, but I'll provide some of that information in a few slides. Next slide, please. Our energy services profile for street lighting is very similar to the profile for almost any energy efficiency project. The Power Authority can have as light of a touch as advisory service if a municipality wanted to take the municipal ownership model. If you wanted to provide general contracting for your own project, which you can do, the Power Authority can have as light of a touch as advisory services through that, and we can have as heavy of a hand as full project site identification and assessment, level 1 auditing, and full project turnkey implementation. So in a turnkey model, as was stated before. So we do, in many cases, these types of projects are one-for-one change-outs. There's not a whole lot of design that goes on, but there are options to do design and to put some engineering behind some of these types of projects. The fundamentally LED technology does not operate in a similar fashion. There's a lot of metal halides. There's a lot of other engineering opportunities to consider, as was stated earlier by my fellow panelists. And so NYPA has a full suite of engineering services out of both our Buffalo and our Albany offices to help our municipalities decide what is the best course of action to take. And I'll speak a little bit to our full suite of financing options, which we provide for our customers as well, low-cost municipal lease financing options. And again, I just touched on some of our advisory services as well. So that suite of services is, specific to this webinar for street lighting, but you would find a similar service profile for any energy efficiency project. Next slide, please. Street lighting. Okay, so specific to street lighting, again, we would help a customer guide through the entire process, as was mentioned by the Mid-Hudson Consortium folks earlier. There are some negotiating opportunities, some purchasing opportunities, all of these things the Power Authority helps with. And again, we also finance the entirety of a project. So this is an opportunity for customers to not have to bond, as was stated earlier, although you can. Any municipality has that option to bond, depending on whether they think that that's a cost benefit to them. One of the benefits of not bonding, however, is it doesn't affect your debt rating. which could have impacts on future potential capital projects and so forth. But the turnkey services that were mentioned before, some specifics if folks aren't really familiar with what a turnkey service is, that's really the opportunity for the Power Authority or for a municipality to lean on the experience of the Power Authority to really begin with a level 1 ASHRAE audit and provide a very thorough financial and energy analysis of the opportunities that you would see by purchasing the streetlights and converting to LED. We also do full bidding and procurement for our customers, so there's no, there's an associated cost with that, labor that's not really always taken into account. One of the benefits of working with the Power Authority is that we will handle all that for you, and again, we'll also oversee all the construction management for a project. We see significant energy and maintenance savings from these projects. In Central New York, we see a wide variety of municipalities and how much of a percentage they own of their streetlights. We generally see a greater opportunity for savings if a municipality is moving to full ownership of their lights. Again, as was stated, there is a significant amount of savings with the maintenance that the utilities are charging their customers. And the Power Authority also would help advise on how a municipality would take over that ownership, as there is a responsibility, as was stated, to owning those lights. But again, the costs on an annual basis are so much lower, just simply because the drivers of LEDs last so much longer and so forth, and I don't want to be too repetitive, but we do allocate that assumption on what we think an annual contract would cost to take over maintenance. We would help you through that process of securing a third-party contractor to do that work. And again, the costs are so much less that the savings are really maximized if you do decide to take ownership of your fleet. And again, our low-cost financing to qualified customers. I will say that we do our homework at NYPA, and I don't actually sit down with customers for an initial conversation unless they're already pre-qualified for financing. It seems somewhat unfair to sit down with folks if we can't already provide them a full suite of our services. So we sort of take care of that process, that review process, and that financing option is already on the table by the time we sit down and have a discussion. Next slide, please. So we can talk a little bit more about the ways in which the Power Authority kind of aggregates this data. We have an opportunity here to register your municipality with the Power Authority. We've been doing this for about 6 months or so, and we've been working very closely with the Clean Energy Communities coordinators as well as countywide economic and development groups to really kind of take a look at Central New York in all its diversity as far as size of municipalities, and how we can best serve our customers. So if you want to sign up with the Power Authority, you can do so here, and I'd be happy to talk to folks after the webinar, obviously, about the specifics for that. Next slide, please. This is the specific PSC order that was referenced earlier. It specifically outlines the timeline with which municipalities have, that was stated through the Mid-Hudson Consortium. Again, you have a 90-day period for the utility to make a purchase offer. Once the municipality sends an initial request for that amount, then you have 180 days to negotiate that price. So the Power Authority will also help. We will indirectly help municipalities through that process, and we're happy to do so. And I wanted to reference the order specifically in the webinar. So if anyone wants to take a deeper dive into the PSC order, you can do so. The S70 PSC order is what's being referenced. Our financing is always a topic of conversation with our customers. This really, I think, our customers that have done the most capital improvements are the ones that are able to understand really the way you can maximize your budget. If you understand the difference between an energy efficiency budget and a capital budget, and how the Power Authority's financing mechanism allows you essentially to do more with less. So if you are trying to take a look at your budgets, whether it's annually or over 5 years or whatnot, you're able to effectively take some capital budgets or some, that you could put towards infrastructure, roads and whatnot, and you can utilize low-cost financing through the Power Authority in a municipal lease model. We're seeing paybacks as low as 5-6 years on some of these projects, depending on the amount of inventory that folks are looking to buy back. When we do it at very low cost, and I'll speak a little bit more about the specifics to that mechanism in a minute. Next slide, please. So we offer a tax-exempt municipal lease. That's been described previously by my fellow panelists. I won't get more into it, but that is the model that the Power Authority offers. It's a no upfront capital opportunity. In fact, any municipal customer that works with the Power Authority, the Power Authority covers all costs from the beginning of a project right through to the end until a customer takes over ownership of that loan. That includes auditing, that includes any aspect of the project. The customer puts no money down. And we would not enter into a financial agreement with a customer until the negotiation process with the utility is completed. So when we provide proposals much earlier in the stage of the game. We utilize data from the projects we've been doing across the state, depending on a particular utility rate, who your utility is, and we give aggregated numbers on what we believe purchase price would be for a potential project. However, we wouldn't sign any financial agreement or binding financial agreement with a customer until you knew what that final price was. This is the overview of our municipal lease. The way that the project financing works essentially is there's two different methods of financing. We have interest during construction. I use the term construction kind of lightly. There's not really a construction to a lighting change out, but essentially that's what I'm calling it. That timeline can be anywhere between 6 months or whatnot. So interest during construction is a variable rate. The Power Authority goes to the money market every month, and we annualize what we believe interest during construction would be, and that changes every February 2nd or 3rd, sometime the first week of February. Right now, I believe that's below 1%. And once a project is completed and a customer takes over ownership of the loan, it moves to a municipal lease with a fixed rate. So you get the benefit of the fixed rate long-term, depending on what the term is. We go up to 15 years, but quite frankly, I believe, exceptions are made really depending on the type of project. I've seen projects go as long as 20 years, though with paybacks that we're seeing, that's absolutely not necessary. I wouldn't even really advise it. But we see fixed rates between 2.5 and 4%, and that's generally what you can assume for a fixed rate for a municipal lease. And you'd see that all across the state. And this slide shows who those contact people are in your individual regions. Again, I'm Casey Mastro. I'm Central New York. I cover the largest square footage in Central New York, Finger Lakes, Mohawk Valley, Central New York, Southern Tier. But I have a fantastic team of people that I work with. Jeff Lano was mentioned for Long Island, Joe Crimmy out in Western New York, Nate in the Albany area, and Jesse in the Mid-Hudson region. And all of them are fantastic and would be happy to take any phone calls or emails on this subject. And the next slide, final slide, is their contact info, which all of you can reference. Anyone is welcome to contact me via phone or email. I'd be happy to answer questions. This is a very hot topic, and we look forward to doing more projects in the state of New York. So I want to thank the Mid-Hudson Consortium to Pat for having me, and for all our other panelists who've taken the time to present this information to all of you. So thank you very much.
Oh, Casey, thank you so much for this comprehensive information. It's really terrific. And I am the guilty party who thought we could present all this information to you in 1 hour and 15 minutes. And as you can see, we're over. Productions that my team does very rarely go over, but this one undoubtedly has. So I'm going to review the questions that have come in and group them, and also offer ways that we can get you the information expeditiously. We had some interesting ones. From Jack Conaway during Jen's presentation. Jack is interested in the topic of reduced light pollution, especially the large variety of questions about the color temperature, color spectrum available and recommended, and further any studies that address the question of which array of wavelengths that provide the best seeing for humans under a variety of weather conditions. So fortunately, we have two good resources. One is the Common Sense Guide that is under final review that we referenced earlier. Jen is the primary author of it, and that will be up on nystreetlights.org in the near future. But also in the first quarter of 2017, the U.S. Department of Energy produced two very interesting reports about street lights and blue light in general that I think, Jack, would answer your question. So please see nystreetlights.org for other resources, and you'll find those U.S. Department of Energy reports there. Bill Elsey of the town of Springfield in NYSEG territory, and Zachary Babby of the village of Dannemora in Clinton County, they're both NYSEG territory inquiries. Essentially, Bill is wondering what the approximate cost would be for purchasing the lights and the payback period, and he has just 28 street lights there. In similar fashion, Zachary in Dannemora has just 129 lights and is wondering if it's even worth it to convert. So back to resources again, Jen Metzger has put together a super guide to purchasing your street lights in NYSEG territory. She also did one for Central Hudson and Orange and Rockland, and those are on nystreetlights.org. But the long and the short of it is, Zachary and Bill, yes, we think it is worth your while, and we spell it out in the numbers that are provided in the long report and in the short guides that we provide on the website there. Let's see. I think I touched on the 4 questions that were emailed to me, but I'm going to just see if there's anything else. Any other questions that have come in? Solar options from David Brewer is wondering about solar street lights. So David, I'm just going to go out on a limb here and say that, NYSERDA was one of the first organizations that I ever heard of that funded solar streetlights under a special grant opportunity that went back a couple of years ago, and that they were installed in Sullivan County. But generally, I think the reason we're not speaking about them at any great length is because they would still be cost prohibitive. I've unmuted a few of the speakers if they want to chime in, but I think that is the long and the short of it there. Let's see. So Angela Skellington is asking if municipalities all across the state can take advantage of this information, and yes. The Mid-Hudson Streetlight Consortium is funded for the Mid-Hudson, but under an arrangement with NYSERDA, we can do a certain amount of work outside the Mid-Hudson of a consultative nature. And so feel free to contact us. Okay, I have a new question here, but it just jumped. I have to go back and try to get it. Well, at any rate, if I see any question here, NYSEG has told us that if the lights become municipally owned, they will require a disconnect switch at each pole. Is this standard practice? Can we get around it? Over to you, Jen Metzger. Oop, Jen, you there? She just muted herself.
Sorry about that. Sorry, this was the question about the fuse?
Yeah.
The disconnect fuse?
Yeah.
So it has become standard practice in New York. As far as I know, it's the only utility that does not require it is Central Hudson. But in the Mid-Hudson region, NYSEG and O&R require it. And I think, as George might want to weigh in here, but utilities are increasingly requiring it elsewhere as well.
Am I unmuted now?
Yes, you are good to go.
Okay, real quick then. The cost of these fuses, I purchased them for around $22 a piece, and the cost to install them is about $10 added cost to the installation of an LED fixture. The justification for the fuses is a line of demarcation that exists between the utility-owned equipment and the town-owned equipment. It's not a safety consideration, but rather a demarcation issue. If it were a safety issue, the utilities would already be engaging these fuses themselves.
Okay.
And this is Amanda. I just want to jump in and let everyone know that the disconnect is also required in National Grid territory.
All right, thank you guys for that. We have a question from Laura Mastracci. I think I got it right. You presented some estimated cost data for the utility buyback of the existing luminaire. However, what data do you have regarding the cost of the mounting arm and the attachment agreement fees, and any cost data on longer-term maintenance contracts? Shall we go to Jen and then George?
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, I gave basically the very sort of high-level conclusions of what was really a very comprehensive analysis of the cost considerations that considered, you know, all the full purchase price. Now, keep in mind when you're purchasing as I mentioned, to determine the purchase prices for the system itself from the utility. The information that we use is the empirical data that exists in each utility territory. And we used an average based on municipal purchase prices that have been negotiated, and they include both the fixture and the arm. You're going to continue, once you take over ownership, in some utility territories, you have to pay an attachment fee, basically a pole rental fee. That's not a very big cost at all, but it is, you know, an annual cost. But we've factored in every cost, at least for the Mid-Hudson utilities, all of the costs into the municipal purchase option, including the cost of installation, the purchase of a fuse, disconnect fuse if that's required, labels for the poles. We've also included, you know, and it's a range of, you know, the fixture costs for LEDs themselves. We included a range for that, and installation costs, you know, insurance costs, everything has been factored into our analysis, so it's pretty comprehensive.
Next question for George. Debbie is wondering, is there an advantage to purchasing the light poles, especially for a small village?
Well, first, you're not going to be able to purchase the light poles if they're joint use. That is, if they have utility wires on them, electric wires, communication wires, and other services. So you're not going to be able to buy those. In the case of the poles that are dedicated to street lights, the answer is it's part of the normal process to purchase the system that you would acquire any dedicated poles that only serve to provide for the lighting, the mounting of the lighting. And it is to your advantage to do that, as a significant portion of the costs of a street light are actually embedded in pole costs.
Right.
Because you pay the utility for dedicated poles, and that cost would disappear.
Okay.
Now, in terms, I do want to mention in terms of these attachment fees, this is an interesting point because, for example, down in Long Island and PSE&G service territory, and as in Philadelphia, the utilities are charging approximately a $7.50 charge per month per light to attach to their poles. And yet, if they properly design their tariffs, the cost of the pole is embedded in the electricity costs. So in what's happened in other states where there is comprehensive legislation that defines how these transfer of assets will occur, the public service commissions have denied the utilities the ability to collect an attachment fee. But yet, some utilities are still getting away with it. And of course, it would have to be challenged in order to change that, which is a difficult process at best.
Thank you, George. We're just about out of time. So Dominic Insina just wants to comment that he wants us to know that by law, an EPC contractor cannot provide the financing, but can assist a municipality in working with their financial consultant and or a municipal lease option. Anyone have a comment there?
That's excuse me. That's a good distinction to make.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Thank you, Dominic. I think we actually answered the questions and comments, and so we are good to go. So thank you all so much, and for those of you who hung in with us, though it was late, we really appreciate that, and we will be following up with the slides and the other materials that we promised. So thank you all for coming to the conversation today, and feel free to reach out to us individually. Thank you so much.
Pat, I assume you'll provide everybody contact information for us.
Oh, absolutely. It's in the handout, which is available on the WebEx screen now, but we'll also be sending it in follow-up. Thank you all. Take care.
Bye.